Hello and welcome to another episode of Digital Transformation Bytes, hosted by myself, Brad Fluck, commercial lead at Interwear. And today I'm really pleased to say I've been joined by Derrick Sawyer from RealWear. Derrick is Regional Director of Northern Europe. Say hello, Derrick.
Hi, everyone.
And Derrick, just give us a bit of an introduction, because obviously you and I work together a lot. So I obviously know you well, and I obviously know what you do very, very well. But, there's going to be some customers out there. We focus this podcast very much on that operational digital transformation, connected work and environment. And there will be some people out there that know the RealWear devices very, very well. But there'll be some people that don't know the RealWear devices as well. So, Derrick, why don't you just give us a little bit of introduction to yourself, a little bit of introduction to RealWear, and then maybe a little bit introduction to the kind of range and models you have as well.
Yeah, definitely. No worries. Thank you, Brad. So as I say, I'm Derrick Sawyer, and I look after Northern Europe for RealWear. RealWear, we've been around for a while. We're from 2016, 2017. We started shipping head-mounted tablets, as it was referred to in the time. We started coining a phrase of a knowledge transfer platform. It was our vision to kind of bring the first line and the frontline worker into the collaboration and the innovation that was happening in the rest of the business. I mean, essentially, we're a wearable device that's operating in the smart glasses space, and we're allowing organizations out there to innovate and change the way that the frontline worker receives, handles, and innovates. And kind of the overlying on top of that is we always had a view on safety. They had to do it safely.
Yeah. I think, and I think that's quite a good little overview. And I think it's interesting that you kind of coin that phrases of wearable and smart glasses, because I think it is a wearable device, and I see it in that smart glasses kind of area, but it's slightly different to maybe some of the other range. And the phrase that I use, and I speak to a lot of customers about digital workflows, and there's specific use cases where the RealWear devices are spot on for what they want to achieve. It's almost like that assisted reality kind of phrase. That's quite an interesting, and I don't know if you could give us a little bit more on that, because I think when people say AR, people that have been in certain environments might automatically think of augmented reality, which is definitely different to assisted reality. So yeah, just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I guess we've got the mixture of all of the reality spectrum: augmented, mixed, virtual, and if we listen to Meta, then we're all going to be in a metaverse by some stage next year. But assisted reality, Brad, I always often think that assisted reality is best described as when you're driving. The most important thing is reality, is the road ahead. But in order to do your journey safely, to get to your destination on time, then you need to be able to look and glance down and see your fuel or your battery capacity, the warning lights or your sat nav. Now, you wouldn't have that in the middle of your eye from a safety perspective. You simply glance down to get the information you need to do your journey right first time and safely. And that's the same concept that we've used for assisted reality.
Yeah, I think that's a really good. Like I said, I've spoke to a lot of customers about RealWear, but I've not used that kind of analogy. But that is very, very good, because I suppose when you're using a RealWear device, and the for people I've done it, it creates the kind of the image of like a 7-inch screen in your peripheral vision. I think what is really cool about it is all the information that suddenly you're given to a connected worker who's hands free, and can still have the ability to completely do their job, completely focus on the task at hand, but have that ability to refer to not only, like you said, consistent information, but deeper information as well. And I speak to customers, and what benefits a lot of people, and Workflow Plus, as Interwear do, it's almost assisting as well, because it's a digital step and those sorts of things. But being hands free and completing a task like that, but then being able to look at a schematic, look at a drawing, even look at an instruction manual
Yeah.
on what you're doing. And of course, you've then got the even better stuff like photos and videos if you're working on maybe a specific item. To suddenly be able to call on that, and not only just call on it and see it, you've got the ability to zoom in, focus on the parts you want. Yeah, that's taking that assistance to even another level after that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. And look, the world is changing, and it's changing right in front of our eyes. We've got a demographic cliff of people retiring with the skills, especially in the first line and the front line. They're retiring with the skills, and there's a new generation coming through, and that generation thinks very differently about a term of service as well. So
Yeah.
when you're talking about providing them with the information, an expert, we might go and speak to somebody at the moment, and an expert in their job might talk about a term of service of 20, 30 years. But absolutely, the generations coming through might think 3 to 5 years is a very long term of service. So it's incumbent upon us to provide them with the information to make them an expert in a fraction at a time. And that's where workflows, a collaboration, instant information, always going back to the same phrase though, instant information with their most important tools, their hands-free. Okay. And to try to overcome that generational change that's coming in.
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting one. I think I've talked on Digital Transformation Bytes a couple of times, and that skills gap comes up a lot.
Yeah.
And that skill gap, and we talk about the people retiring, and we talk about the next generation coming through. But I think you make a really, really good point there about term of service. It's not something we've discussed about. I think there's two things that new generation are coming through. They're not looking for the pen and paper. They're not looking for the clipboard as one point. But attrition levels have changed. Now, you're right. If you went back 25 years and you looked at attrition levels of staff and said why people are leaving, you'd instantly go, well, are we doing something wrong? Are we not giving people the right environment? Is it the process, etc.? But I do believe, like you said, mentality has changed. People aren't going into a job and saying, I'll be here when I retire after coming in as an apprentice. That doesn't happen. 3 or 4 years. It's something we've seen in sales, I think, for a longer period of time, especially in some of the major hubs. 2 or 3 years is quite a long term as a salesperson in an environment. But I think it's stretched out to the operational workers, the engineers, the manufacturing industries. So I think that's quite a good point. And coming back to that information point you made there as well, I think that's a very, very good point. So I've hinted that obviously Interwear and RealWear have worked together for quite a while. How do you feel about the relationship? How long have we been working together? And how do you see Workflow Plus enhancing users' experience with RealWear devices?
Well, I guess Bradley, I'm coming up to 4 years that I've been at RealWear. And the relationship with Interwear pre-exists me sometime. But it was quite easy for when I turned up to look at the application that Interwear had, to look at how Interwear went to market. It just seemed that we were so in step with each other. And that was really important. That's really important. It's really important for our end users that our goals and our ambitions and our drives are hand in hand. So we've got a long-standing relationship. The other thing is that I guess in the software and technical world, Interwear had just ticked one fantastic box. They understood the concept of usability, and they'd created a user interface that I could pick up and I could look at it and say, this is easy. This is easy to adopt. This is easy to present. It's really the go-to workflow for a RealWear to put on and say, look at what you can do. Look at the benefits you can do. And so I guess we've got that long-standing relationship, and it's a long-standing relationship based on common goals, common views, and the ability to change and transform because of simplicity. Okay. We've simply given people a device that is easy to use, and you've given people an application that is easy to adopt. I know that there is a journey behind, and we've got to make sure that we understand and we communicate that journey. Whereas in integration, there's a journey behind, but it starts off with simplicity and understanding the end user. And I thought from day one that Interwear absolutely got that.
Yeah, I think that's quite a good one. I think you and I have obviously worked with a lot of big organizations, and sometimes selling what we're doing isn't the toughest thing. It's deploying what we're doing to the end user. So user acceptance and UAT, or all the phrases that get coined these days, are so important. I think it's interesting you mentioned, because I like I said, when I first, you know, took on a RealWear device, what I was very eased about is it is effectively the same sort of concept as a tablet, which is you've got an Android operating process. You know, it's a little bit different because you stick it on your head to a tablet or a phone naturally, but the principles after that are exactly the same. So for people that haven't used it, and any sort of digital transformation, sometimes people are like, oh, that's a little bit different. But once you've got the device on, it's very simple. You've got a home screen like you have on every device. You download apps, and now you can download the apps from the RealWear store, or you can go the old-fashioned way and put an APK in. So very simplistic. And then effectively, instead of using your fingers, you just use your voice to select the app, and then you go into the app, and then you operate the app. And I think that's very important. And it's got all the features as well, which is so cool. Which is, you know, the first thing everyone does, they get a mobile phone out, you take a picture. But imagine having that ability to dictate to it. Imagine having that ability to take those pictures in the work environment and those sorts of things. So I think it's a really good point that both from an Interwear point of view, when we designed the app is so simple to use. You know, whether you're using that on any style of device, but on the RealWear device, you can just dictate to it as you go through, and it's so simplistic. And I think that's a massive plus for anyone, because I come back to that point, like you said, it's about deploying, it's about getting people using. So not only the business generating from all this enriched data, everything's being picked up, the workers then getting informed information, informed data to them, but very simple to use.
Yeah, it is. But, you know, kicking forward on that deployment,
Yeah.
a big part of our job is to get organizations to understand that deployment curve.
Yeah.
And the beauty is I run workshops, I have these conversations, and what we do, we from sector to sector, industry to industry, enterprise to enterprise, we've learned a lot of lessons along the way.
Yeah.
We've learned, you know, a phrase I keep using, because I think it resonates with organizations out there, is buying the device just as a device because it's interesting will land it in the cupboard of regret. And every enterprise has a cupboard of regret out there, that they've all got these devices that they bought that promised, a lot of them very good, but because they didn't understand how they could take that all the way through to deployment. So we spend a lot of time, and I know you do as well, and we've done this together, spend a lot of time talking through the deployment element of RealWear, just to make sure that the use cases are defined, that there's a real metric. And I know that you and I have spoken about metrics before. A common way to speak about metrics is a return on investment. And I guess if you talk about return on investment, you're always looking for almost one golden nugget there. But when you talk about metrics, it may well be that you need to reduce your carbon footprint for commitments you're making. It may well be that employee enablement is the key metric to be able to do this, to actually bring staff on and allow them to integrate into the business much quicker than we've ever been able to do before. What we do is we talk and we have workshops, and we talk about the metrics and the importance of those. And then we identify those use cases and we bring them on. And I think that's really important to understand, that even though it is an Android tablet, there is a behavioral change and there is a transition to real value. and you can get real value, but there is a process to value.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think to kind of snapshot that, I think if businesses are looking at this and they're watching this podcast and they're thinking, right, we do need to do something, how do we go about it? I think it's not about looking at the whole picture straight away. The one I use quite often is evolution over revolution. And it's finding that specific use case. And you mentioned use cases, and that might be 5, 10, 15 users, 20 users, but it gives a business a very good bedrock to start looking at how we can do it, how we can change the way we're working, what's the end result, and what do we get out of it that we don't already do. And productivity gains are a massive one. I think risk and compliance, because you're picking up data, and that is a massive one. But like you said, it's working on that business case, and ROI can mean so many different things to businesses at the moment. Yes, you can save money. Yes, you can save time. But the carbon is a massive, massive challenge for a lot of businesses. And again, just reducing paper, that's a massive step. The RealWear devices as well, and Workflow Pluses. There's things you can build off of them, like things like Remote Expert, which is where if I'm a junior engineer and you're the senior engineer, Derrick, you're based in New York and I'm in, I don't know, a mine in Africa.
Yes.
And I get to a stumbling block and I haven't quite got the answer to the problem at hand, but Derrick's got the answer and Derrick knows this. The old model might be, right, Derrick's off to the airport, Derrick could be with us in 24 hours time. But now with these sorts of devices, and we come back to what we were talking about originally, completely hands-free, using a Remote Expert platform as well, I can connect straight into that senior engineer. Derrick can then see what I'm doing, take over what I'm doing, and then support me in the whatever task it is I was struggling with. So I've seen businesses, and I'm sure you could probably articulate it better than I could. I've seen businesses that have saved an absolute fortune in money and travel time just from that benefit from a real world device alone.
Yeah, we have. I remember famously reading about one of our joint customers in Goodyear, and I remember reading when they said, we did this because we couldn't travel under COVID. That was their problem. That was their main thing to overcome. Then they realized that when they didn't travel, their metric, the mean time to repair, significantly reduced. Their carbon footprint came down. They were repairing quicker. Their uptime was significantly better. Even their employee satisfaction was greater because they weren't away from home, away from their family. So they famously said, return on investment in a day. Every time we use these and we don't have to travel, not only do we get these operational benefits, we get a return on investment. What they then did is they went and then took the device that they used for that and said, right, how can I deliver that into different areas? How can I deliver that capability? What can I do? Can I bring people on? Can I do my maintenance in a far more predictive, auditable way? And Brad, when you spoke about, if you're in a mine in Africa and I'm in New York, the other, and especially in oil, gas, mining, etc., the other factor to come into account is if I don't travel to help with that role, and if I'm under pressure to make sure that that job is completed today, the real danger there is that I'll do it wrong. And if I do it wrong, it might be just that I damage infrastructure, but even worse, I might hurt myself. And nobody should go to work fearing for their health, fearing for their life, just because they don't have the right information to do the job right first time. And that's what, I really do see from Interware's perspective in certain verticals. That's a really important aspect to it, is not just the auditable fashion, but making sure there's not errors that put people at risk.
You're right. It's an amazing amount of customers I've dealt with where we have a specific use case, and that use case is always industrial. So, like you said, it's oil and gas, it's mining, maybe utilities, infrastructure, maybe heavy manufacturing as well. and they find a use, and that use case will be built around inspections, or it'll be built around, you know, engineering or fixing, or etc., etc. But the amount of companies that have then gone and, right, okay, we can put a point of work risk assessment at the front.
Yeah.
You know, what we can do is just tile that on board, and then, you know, whether that's on a RealWear device or another, you know, you can then complete your point of work risk assessment accurately, properly, all the stability as well. So even from the organization's point of view, they know then they're giving each staff member the right information, the correct information based on what their tasks at hand. And safety, like I said, away is a big, again, a big ROI for businesses that are in very heavily industrialized environments.
Yes.
You know, working on an oil rig, working in a mine isn't the safest environment. It's not like you and I sat in our office sometimes, you know, we're not we're not going to get hurt. We might still spill our coffee on our lap, but that's as bad.
Or a paper cut, and you know,
paper cuts as well. Yeah, don't forget them. But you make a very, very good point there, and I think safety is a huge plus. So looking at RealWear devices, and you know, when we first started the conversation, you said, you know, 2017 sort of thing. So RealWear has matured into an environment, but it's matured into an environment that has changed.
yes.
How's RealWear evolved in that changing, you know, the changing demands of the digital transformation era, and I suppose other devices coming to market as well?
Yeah, I guess we've stayed true to our to our design, and we've stayed true to our principles as well. So whilst innovation for innovation's sake, it's not a great thing. So what we've done is, as our device has evolved, it's got lighter, it's got more flexible, it's easier to use, greater, it's far greater positioning, etc. But we've stayed true to the design, because we've now got, through from 2017, generations of workers using the device. So we're committed to making the device more usable, more flexible. We've also been working hard to make it more manageable as well, for global enterprises to administer, to manage, to get the right applications, to have the right security and insights on that device. And we've been working really hard in that way. I think the user experience, as you take the device and put it on your head, is so much easier. And the word that we use and that our product team are always pumping through to us is friction. If we can remove friction, if we can remove any of the headaches that a frontline worker can have on putting advice on and saying, well, how do I use this? What do I do? Okay. So I guess that's what we're doing. We're continuing to innovate. We're continuing to change. I'm incredibly proud, for example, of the thermal camera. We've now got
I was going to bring that one up. Yes, option. It's so cool.
And it will seem a little bit to some people, I think it seems like gimmicky. Oh, can I see that? Can I get a predator view? But the reality of it is,
that's how I describe it.
The reality is that if, through seeing the invisible, through using thermal, I can do preventative maintenance, so that I can understand either a progressive decline, temperature change, etc., and prevent that outage or prevent that major incident occurring, because I've got the ability to see the invisible. Those sort of innovations are really important. And you know, I'm particularly pleased we're bringing out our new intrinsically safe, a class 1 div 1 zone 1 intrinsically safe, and that gets launched this quarter. And I'm incredibly excited to see that we've been able to get a thermal module for that, so that you can actually take that preventative maintenance into the most demanding zones in the world, and that's how we continue to innovate.
I think that is. I think there's a lot of good things there. Yeah, I'm very excited about the Z1 as well. I think that'll be interesting when it comes out. It looks cool as well, and I think that I think people always will go back to, you know, is it safe? Is that? But again, when a device looks cool as well, I think that does have a bit of credibility for everyone. So we're gonna. And I think what I like about it is, from my point of view, is, you know, since the Navigator 500. And if obviously people listening to this haven't seen it, if you search Navigator 500 in Google, it will come up. I think what I like about them is that modular side of it now, where you can take things on and off. You can adjust things for, you know, which side your dominant eye is, etc., etc. Like the camera thing, and I think it's worth talking about the thermal camera, because when I heard it, I was like, oh, that is specific. But the thermal camera is still the camera. So when you get a Navigator 500 or a 520, you can take pictures in the camera for people listening, but you can still do that with the thermal camera. But then you can just go up a level each time, where it picks up different heat signatures, and it is cool. And I always come back to cool, and you know, it's you know, we like to be serious on the podcast, but we like to talk about the cool sides. The highest level is pretty much full predator mode. So if you've seen the film Predator and you're looking for something, admittedly you're not trying to check out Arnold Schwarzenegger or Danny Glover, but what you are trying to do there is pick up any sort of heat signatures. So it's so cool, because if you're maintaining something or doing an inspection, and like you said, just from that safety point of view, if you look at something with the naked eye, you can't see if heat's being produced somewhere unless it's on an absolute astronomical level that it's turning the metal red. But you
Yes.
can put the thermal camera on, look at whatever you're trying to inspect, and quite quickly you can pick up the heat signatures. So I think that's very, very cool. And it still then goes back to just being a basic camera. If you need it as a basic camera, just to take your photographs, take your videos in the environment you're in. So yeah, I
Well,
think that's a massive plus.
Brad, if you can, you know, we look at inspections, and doing inspections in an auditable fashion is really important. I often use the example is if you're maintaining a lift, and you've maintained a lift for 20 years, but there's a valve in the lift that's never gone wrong in 20 years. Unconscious incompetence actually stops you looking at it because it's never gone wrong.
Yeah.
Even worse, if you then hand over to a generational change, you won't tell them to look at it. But if it does, the lift drops straight to the bottom. And Interwear and Workflow Plus allow that more predictability to come into that, to understand that there's a process and there's an auditable process. But then when you bring the thermal camera into the auditable process, so if I'm doing that and I'm taking a thermal image of that, then I can track that over a process. I know that if I'm seeing heat increases over a 3-month cycle, I need to intercept that before it gets to failure or before it gets to breakage. And again, that just brings it back to process and prevention of downtime or damage. Okay. And whilst it just seems so cool to use, and it really is a bit of fun as well, it's got real benefit.
Well, I think you go back to what we were talking about, that next generation. You know, is that what the next generation expects? I think it is. I do, and I mean both from a hardware point of view and a software point of view. That if I was that age again, I wish I was, but I'm not, unfortunately. If I was just joining the workforce and I got given, you know, a pen and paper and a clipboard, and then was told that after I'd done this, I then need to go back and take some pictures on something, and then find those pictures, download those pictures, and then go into Word, Excel, or an ERP system and type it all up. Naturally, I would class that as counterproductive, and I think that is. But then to suddenly have a really cool device, which is new, is unique, is cutting edge, to have software which will collect the data and information for me, I think that's got to be a big draw. And I think that, you know, like I said, doing a lot of events, expos, and doing work with universities like Cranfield University, where both they use Workflow Plus and RealWear devices for things like MRO, pre-flight inspections, but they're not doing it to fly the plane. They're doing it to train the next generation of, you know, companies like Rolls-Royce, Boeing, etc., etc. You know, that's the feedback we get from these people. It's the feedback we get from these graduates that using the RealWear device, using Workflow Plus, is how they see it should be done, because it increases productivity. The downtime you spend as an individual is reduced massively because you've got instant reporting, instant data collection, and like you said, it's cool, and that's what they want. You know, that's what that next generation. So I think that's a really good point. So on those kind of ideas, I think another area that I see growing in the operational side of things is business intelligence and analytics. It's a huge increase. So not only now are RealWear devices, Workflow Plus, and that giving businesses the ability to complete the task quickly, the organization wants to learn as well and
Of course.
it's pop its trend. So you mentioned preventative maintenance. One of the big things of a lot of businesses want to choose is educated predictive maintenance and things like that. So how
Yeah.
do you see RealWear devices contributing to data collection and analytics and those sorts of things?
Yeah, we've seen quite a few use cases on, particularly brought to mind a relatively recent engagement into the start of this year, where they were maintaining small machinery that was often outside, and it was across the whole of Europe and it was across the whole of Africa as well. And they found that having the maintenance schedule on RealWear devices, they were able to bring back that information and analyze it. And instead of just doing their normal maintenance, they could do preventative. So rather than a maintenance on schedule, it was maintenance on demand or based on knowledge. They've taken hundreds of thousands out of their maintenance cost, but they've also taken downtime out. They were talking about at any one time 15 to 20% their machinery was down. Now what they can do is understand that in some of the more humid areas, when they do that, this chipset will go wrong. So they can change that before the next schedule comes up. They can find out that in some of the warmer temperate, drier areas, they don't need the same maintenance window. So they've really been able to go not only maintain in a more consistent fashion, they've been able to use that information to provide a better service to their customer. Okay, look, their main goal was going back to it. Their metric, provide a better service and uptime wherever they are in the world to their customer. And they've been able to do that by taking workflow in, by understanding that, and using the device to do that. I guess we're almost not scratching the surface of that at the moment. I mean, next generation of devices, we've got our new AI chip based into the new Z1. Next generation and things that I've seen being tested. I mean, Brad, I was really excited for somebody to be able to pick up and using visual AI to look at a valve and start to understand what that was. Imagine if the future holds that I can go into an area, I can look at something, it pops and tells me what I'm looking at, but then gives me the maintenance flow based on that recognition. It's really, really just trying to take the friction out of it. It's an exciting world to come.
It is, and I think it's interesting. I think business intelligence analytics are massive because they however you're collecting the data, and we hope they're using a RealWear device and Workflow Plus and those sorts of things. But it is, you mentioned downtime. Downtime's an expensive cost for any business in any sort of industrial environment, and we see that being massively reduced. And the information collected via a platform like Workflow Plus, using things like Power BI dashboards, and that gives them such a easy way to then envisage how they can improve the business, both short term, medium term, and long term. And you talk about the future, and you talk about R&D, and you say scratching the surface. And I think that is because I think some businesses are very, very slow to pick up the future. They're very slow, and you always get pushed by customers. But another good one, and how I see future things going, is a customer that you and I have been working with, or a RealWear and Inter have been working in a part of the world where they also use IoT. And you like you said, if you had that AI chip and that was telling you information about what you're doing, the IoT information sensor is pushing live information about the asset into the workflows we were doing, and then having all that, the ability to do it hands-free. That's really exciting. And I think it is, like I said, I think we are just starting to scratch the surface. And what I see is a massive acceleration over the next 2 to 5 years as organizations suddenly realize the adaptability that this sort of approach can have for its organization. And it's not making the workers' life easier, it's going to make the organization's life a lot easier to see where there's savings to be made, where there's advances on the top line to be made. Because I still believe most sales come down to you're either increasing the revenue, you're either saving me money, or you're reducing risk.
My risk.
We're in
Yeah.
one of those lucky trinities.
Yep. Yep.
We affect all three. We affect
Yes.
all three because you
Yep.
can be more productive, get more work done, make your client's life easier, invoice my work. We know we can save time and money. We've covered that in this call. And again, coming back to the information, the data collected, the information provided to connect a worker, we reduce risks massively.
Yeah.
So all those sorts of things said, Derrick, if there's a company out here and they're listening to this, what sort of advice or what sort of steps would you recommend to ensure a kind of smooth introduction to this kind of world and an adoption of this sort of process of wearables, etc.?
Look, I think it's always worth looking at best practice. Okay, and a large part of my job is to go to customers and talk to them about best practice, not just in their industry, by the way, but none of us should be shy about peeping over the fence into another industry, into another vertical, and sometimes learning about the great things, but also learning about the terrible things that you shouldn't replicate that might have gone wrong. So we continually, at the moment, a huge amount of our time is spent having workshops with organizations and just formatting the start point.
Yeah.
Talking about the journey. And the journey isn't about hardware. It's not necessarily about software. This is about looking at the organization and what their aspirations are and how they want to change, where they're looking to go to, and then plot that and align as to where we've done that before and where we've seen real successes. So I always say, start the journey at the right place by collating as much information as you can from people that have run these programs before. And that's a big part of what RealWear are doing. And we're out there globally talking to people about these programs and where we've seen success. I believe we can take months off the integration, and that just brings the value far, it just brings the value closer. And so that's what I would recommend as an early step.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is, and again, if it's even easier if someone's got that kind of use case in mind. And I think you brought up another good point. What we're talking about here is being used globally as well. From my knowledge, I know it's being used in Australasia. I know it's being used in Asia. I know it's being used in Africa. We know it's being used in South America. We know it's being heavily used in the North America / Canada region and that sort of thing. And as you know as well, because obviously, you're heading up Europe for RealWear, Northern Europe for RealWear, there's a lot of usage close to home as well. There's a lot of usage in the UK, a lot of usage there. So it's not, for some people listening, it might seem a little bit, a step beyond where they are, but it's tried and tested. What we're talking about here is being used on a day-to-day basis.
It is, and I think one of the most exciting things, for me, one of the most exciting things about my job is that almost on a weekly basis, somebody will come to me with a different use case, whether that is being used and where our devices are on oil rigs, etc., and out to sea. And we realize that those devices can be used to save lives as well by putting remote healthcare into them. Whether it's that we're saving lives using them across in Norway for paramedics to give critical life-saving attention, triaging back to hospitals, to usage over in the Antarctic, and actually bringing people from the UK closer to those operations, even from an education perspective. The use cases keep changing, and that actually makes our job so much more exciting.
It does. It makes it fun. I get, I think I see that as well. Obviously using RealWear devices in the market with the Workflow Plus platform and Workflow Plus platform and that. the use cases are varied, so varied, and it does make it exciting because it creates little challenges, and that's what you want, because when you do make a difference, and you can see the benefits of some organizations. I think healthcare is a good one we haven't mentioned out today. I know RealWear is doing some great work around the world in various areas there as well, and it does make a huge difference. So yeah, I think that's great, and I think we've kind of covered off everything. I don't know if there's anything left you want to talk about, Derrick, on the
No, bro,
RealWear devices.
just to say thank you. This is it's a recognition. Us spending this time is a recognition at how closely our companies have worked for many years now, and we'll be doing that for many years in the future.
And again, Derrick, if anyone's listening to this and they instantly feel need to, how can people get hold of you?
So it's derrick.sawyer@realwear.com, or get across to the realwear.com website. There's a huge amount of information across there, and you can always request to be contacted wherever you are in the world. So we've got operations around the world, so request to be contacted and we'll be able to help you out.
Excellent. Right, well, Derrick, a massive thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation. I think it was I think we covered a lot of areas there. I hope people find it informative and educational on where we are as a partnership, but also where different areas of the world, different organizations and different markets are taking advantage of this sort of technology. So big thank you, and we'll see everyone else on the next episode of Digital Transformation Bytes. Thank you. Bye-bye.